We're talking about immigrants and immigration policy. Betty, what happened? Recently there was an arrest of several people in Maryland who had kidnapped some people from Fujian province and had them in a house in Maryland, several cramped-in rooms. We know that last June, the Golden Venture, there were several people there. There's always talk about kidnapping, extortion, heroin trafficking as well. What's happening in the Asian American community to stem this tide?
Well, I don't know. This is the downside of immigration. Every group that comes in, the dirt comes in too. I mean, it's just human nature. And this has become a huge problem for Chinese American and Asian Americans as a group, because there's this whole people smuggling thing that's going on from Fujian province to the U.S. It's been very difficult for the Asian American community because a lot of people feel it's stigmatized us as a community, that we're corrupt, that we're evil, that we traffic in our own
they
people.
Shouldn't feel that way. The Black Hand existed with the Italians early on, which was a precursor of
and we have coyotes who are Mexican guys who sometimes are not the most scrupulous people in the world. They actually are ransomed off at $10,000 to $15,000 to $30,000. In fact, it was a tip that led them to Maryland. Have you had any personal experience? Do you know people that this has happened to?
We all know people who know people. It's very hard, and what happens is this is the newest group of Chinese coming. They have their own language, which is very hard for other Chinese to understand. There are a lot of dialects in China.
I thought Mandarin was becoming the national
There's
language.
a national language, but in the countryside, people still have their own way of talking. And the more country you get, the more country people become. So the Fujian people have decided this is the place they want to be. Somebody goes home and says it's great. Somebody writes a letter and says I'm making money. Then all of a sudden everybody wants to come.
You mentioned in your article, Betty, that one of the problems is that the Chinese government now is taking away their land and building hotels for tourists from Taiwan and from Bangkok. So they're losing their land in their own country. Is that why they're coming here?
It's very complicated with the government. I don't know quite what to say about that. We don't quite understand why it's being allowed and why people are being encouraged to come. I mean, think about it. Why are they coming from just this one area in such large numbers? What kind of politics are going on there?
There was another statement that I heard from a police official who said that so much China white is coming in. It's the same situation with the Colombian situation and with so many other the Africans had the heroin connection.
The biggest is Nigeria now.
That's right. Heroin is coming in, and they're questioning whether or not that's becoming a problem too, whether the illegal immigrants are being used as couriers. Have you heard anything to that effect?
No, not me personally, but we have to understand that the gangs that are operating are pretty much free agents. I mean, they combine, they recombine, they group, they regroup. There is the thought in some law enforcement circles now that they've laid low for a while, now they're trying to regroup in different ways and figure out how to get them in.
How the gang contacts the people in China, how they bring them over here, and the hostage money and everything else. How does it work?
Okay, you live in Fujian province, you want to come over here, you know this guy that lives across the street. He knows a guy who has relatives here, and they're in this business where they can help get you to this country. They help you get the papers, you pay them some money, you get on a boat.
Initial money, because you still have to pay when you get here.
Or some people don't pay at all. It depends. It's really.
And then they have to pay when they get here.
What about the $30,000 that they?
Well, that's the relatives have to pay.
That's
that
the ransom
when they get
on your head,
But everybody doesn't pay ransom, so it has to be. These are selected out.
Well, that's why people get kidnapped. So you come up with money real quick. You think they're bluffing? They will kidnap.
And they will kill.
They will kill too, sure. And they don't always come directly here. They might stop over in Central America somewhere.
Puerto Rico?
Yes, Puerto Rico.
They stop at Santo Domingo, Ed, and from Santo Domingo they get little boats and they go right to Miami.
What was interesting about Betty Lou's article was that somebody in Chinatown knows when this is happening because the prices that you pay
for dishwashers.
Dishwashers go down, right?
Supply and demand,
$600 a month. People should know that $600 a month is
it
the
might
going
include
rate.
a little bunk in some hole in the wall.
Well, the same thing is happening with so many of the Mexican workers. We go into these restaurants, whether they be Korean or delis, and we see these guys working behind. They seem to have sunny dispositions. Let me tell you, there's from a certain state, they're doing the dishwashing. They're being paid a pittance. We see them up in East Harlem. They're being paid they sell flowers, the women sell flowers, but they're being, and very often abused. And there's nothing that they can say because the employer will say, we'll send you back.
But as Leon pointed out, you have to talk about two different groups. You have to talk about the legal immigrants and the illegal. And the INS has a responsibility to stop the illegal immigration, and it is not doing it. I mean, our borders are more fluid than any other country in the world.
Can you really erect a solid a solid,
Can I tell you
a
how to do
solid
it?
barrier
I'm gonna tell you how to do it.
against Canadians coming in or against
you
Mexicans
use the
coming
Army. You use the Navy. In the same way they could stop drugs if they wanted to use our military forces. Nixon,
If they
who
wanted to.
who we all deplore,
Yeah.
he stopped the introduction of marijuana, which was coming in on the Mexican
Mexico,
border
that's
in
right.
1971,
He also
by
sprayed it with
interdicting
paraquat,
it.
which wasn't the greatest
Well, that's a
thing in the
different thing.
But Ed, do you
it-
really want to deploy those kind of resources? And
Yes, I do, for
why?
drugs particularly. Absolutely. I mean, when you have about 8 million illegal immigrants here, I'm not for that. If you have a country as we do, which takes in 1 million legal people a year, that's, I think, generous.
Here's an interesting proposition. We now have a global recession. If we're doing badly here, if blacks and browns and Asians are doing badly here in this country.
And whites.
And whites. Like, imagine what's happening
Whites
worldwide.
don't count.
No, they do. They do.
very
No,
With
they
you?
do. No, they do. Very much so with me. But now we're all human beings. Now we have a situation where in Haiti they're coming over, in South America, in El Salvador they're coming over, in Peru they're coming over, in Ireland they're coming over in record numbers. On Webster Avenue, Mr. Wiles, there are undocumented aliens. They happen to be doing construction work, ruddy, big-boned Irishmen, but they're illegal. They're all
Felipe,
doing
Ed
badly. How do we tell them not to come in?
But you know what?
Ed
a
has
lot of-
touched on something very important. He said we bring in 1 million legal immigrants, and then we have to keep out these illegals. And the difficulty is that we have an agency, the Immigration Service, doing its best under terrible circumstances,
wonderful.
but it's totally schizophrenic. On the one hand, they're given X dollars
Yeah.
to do a job, and they are told on the one hand, admit the right people, bring them in the right order, get them all settled, do whatever
Of
you need to
the
do.
illegals?
The legals.
Of the legals, sure.
And then they're told you're also in charge of a border patrol and you have to keep the others out and
With
deport and
37
exclude
agents.
the others and so on. And this is a totally
So you
schizophrenic
think the agency
also-
has to be split?
I think that perhaps with some thought ought to be given to splitting it or giving part of it, the enforcement part, to another agency.
But
Betty?
this is not fixable. I mean, the other part is not everyone thinks the Immigration Naturalization Service is wonderful. There are real problems with the policy, and
What's the
seeming-
policy you object to?
Well, I think it's
Oh,
racist, first of all.
What's
Yes.
racist?
Well, first of all, what we tell the Haitians is not
That's
what we tell
Clinton.
Albanians.
Clinton,
no,
and
no.
Well, here's
Bush.
a-
That
here's
was
an
Bush.
example
It
of
was not only Clinton,
racism.
it was Bush. We have
No,
a definitely
actually,
racist
Bush,
policy.
do you
with
know
regard-
that
and you
Haitian-
said that on this
Let
program.
me just say to you, there's no question that our policy towards Haiti is racist. And when Bush allowed the Haitians to come here, 1/3 of them were found after hearings to be entitled to political sanctuary. Clinton, who pretends,
That's right.
what a big open guy he
Yes.
is on race, etc.
Sent them right
He's
back.
sending him back so they can't land.
Hypocrisy at its best. More of Good Day Street Talk right after these messages.